one of my favorite quotes, Cameron is so tight that if you stuck a lump of coal up his ass in 2 weeks, you'd have a diamond. You know, it was just one of those ones that the stupid little quotable things, and we would just say them to each other just randomly, and we just giggle.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yannis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. This week, we're going to be talking about the 1986 film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, written and directed by John Hughes, and I'm honored to welcome back to the show Kimberly Cook. Welcome back to the Crooked Table Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Rob. It's a pleasure to get to collaborate with you again.
Yeah, so it's been almost a year since we talked about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, at this point. So I guess we should follow that up with, that was how the saga started. What did you think about The Rise of Skywalker and how they ended things?
I actually did enjoy it. It tied up a lot of loose ends. The film itself, I think, was just messy in general, just because it was busy. And they did have a lot to tie up. But I think they tied it up with a pretty nice bow to end the saga, and I was actually pleased with it.
Yeah, I know people that think it's the worst of all of the movies, and I don't know if I quite go that far. I will say I was more or less disappointed by elements of it, but I you know, like we talked about The Phantom Menace, like I don't think that's a necessarily, air quotes, great movie either, but there are things in there that I enjoy, and ultimately it's still Star Wars. So, but my thing with The Rise of Skywalker, and I've said this I think on the show before, is that it's just, to me, it's the most frustrating Star Wars, because it does something really cool, and then it follows it up with something that I like, a decision that I just can't follow, or like something that I just like the whole Palpatine thing, basically. Like I feel like it gets a lot of little things right, and it botches a lot of the big things. Like the wider mythology stuff is all over the place, and I have issues with that. But the little moments with Rey and Kylo / Ben. With the friends, the chemistry between the three of them actually having screen time together this time, a lot of the small things I really like about it. So it's a begrudging a final chapter to the saga, but it's obviously one I'm still gonna get on Blu-ray and all that other stuff. So I don't understand people that just like dismiss it completely, and they're just like, what a garbage, what a dumpster fire. And I'm like, well, I mean, elements of that I get, but you hear these, they have these videos on YouTube where at the end of the movie, when, spoilers for people who haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker, when Rey is on Tatooine and the lady's like, oh, Rey what? And she's like, Skywalker. And then you hear all the people go, oh, I hate Star Wars or whatever. And I'm like, well, then this movie's not for you if you hate Star Wars. I mean, the whole point is to come, I don't know. I'm very all over the place with that one, as you can tell, basically.
Sure, but I will tell you that when I found out that it was being released early on digital due to the whole quarantine thing that we're all going through right now, I did actually go out and buy it the minute it was available on digital. So we have actually, I think I've watched it twice. I think my husband's only watched it once, but it was definitely something we had to add to our collection. And I will buy the Blu-ray too, just to have a physical copy of the book.
Yeah, I'm holding out until the Blu-ray. I think it's like the end of the month or something. Otherwise, I would have just done the digital too. I'm one of the people that still clings to physical media as long as I possibly can. I still buy DVDs and Blu-rays. A lot of people, I think, just download it and that's it. And I can't get on board with that yet.
No, we do both. We've got quite the extensive collection of DVDs, Blu-rays, CDs, video games, anything like that we still hold onto the physical media as well. We'll download a couple of things here and there just for convenience mostly, but we're just like you, we keep a hold of the physical stuff too. So
yeah, I'm clinging to my Blu-rays until my last breath, basically, until they completely phase it out, and then I'll be like, all right, fine, I'll buy it on iTunes. I don't have a choice, I guess now.
Yeah,
but yeah, cool. So yeah, I wanted to make sure we did follow up with that last episode, and that was really fun going through the Star Wars saga, and that was the episode that we did together that really kind of inspired me to just, you know what, I should just do all of them. Let's just talk about all the Star Wars movies. And it just kind of fell into place, the timing of it and everything. So we're actually be doing Harry Potter this year. So I have different Harry Potter episodes scheduled and people can look forward to that. But
I will say I listened to the handful of the Star Wars episodes, and I will say they were great podcasts. So, keep up the great work with the series with stuff like that. I think that would work out really, really cool.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have to check and see if I have any Harry Potter openings. If you're interested at all in Harry Potter.
That was one of the ones that I didn't get into as much. I've actually only ever seen the first two.
Okay.
Strike me down. I know. Actually, my mother is a diehard Harry Potter fan.
It's all good.
She cringes when I say, "Well, I've only ever seen the first two." I've only ever read one of the books. So
okay.
That's one of the ones.
You're one of those people.
Yeah.
You're a muggle, is what people would call you. I
am.
Nice. So this episode, we're here to talk about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
What is so dangerous about a character like Ferris Bueller is he gives good kids bad ideas.
Well, why should he get to skip school when everybody else has to go?
Syphilitic meningitis.
He never gets caught.
This guy in my biology class said that if Ferris dies, he's giving his eyes to Stevie Wonder.
Well, he's very popular, Ed.
I recall Central Park in fall.
Ferris Bueller, do you know him? Yeah, he's getting me out of summer school.
They think he's a righteous dude.
Think he'll be alive this weekend?
I can see him denying popular belief, setting off on some impossible mission.
He jeopardizes my ability to effectively govern this student body.
He does whatever he wants,
You know, as long as I've known him, everything works for him.
whenever he wants,
He's very cool.
and he never gets nailed.
Ferris can do anything.
Oh, he's such a sweetie.
Wake up and smell the coffee, Mrs. Bueller.
That was a little bit of the trailer for Ferris Bueller's Day Off from 1986, written and directed by John Hughes. So, Kimberly, what is it about Ferris Bueller's Day Off that made this the next film you wanted to talk about on the show?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off is by far my most favorite movie ever. And I don't even know how it got to be my favorite movie. It was one of those ones that, my friends and I would quote to each other, and anytime it was on TV, I had to sit and watch it. And it was just one of those stories that it's just a fun, silly story. It just kind of takes you out of reality and just kind of puts you in this over the top, because Ferris Bueller is an over the top guy, over the top character, into the situations that are they really happening in real life? Could stuff like this actually happen in one day? And it's just good, clean fun.
It's also, I think, it's sort of John Hughes' specialty, which is kind of those suburban fantasies. Like, they're all kind of set in suburbia. Not all, right. But I guess I'm thinking also of some of the movies that he's written, like Home Alone. Breakfast Club is another one that's right. Kind of set in the small town, Illinois. Weird Science, a lot. That seems to be kind of his thing, where everything is heightened. Weird Science to an enormous degree, but that is kind of his wheelhouse. Everything is set in either Chicago or the fictional Shermer, Illinois. And I don't know, there must be something in the air, because I recently recorded an episode that I still haven't, well, by the time people hear this, I will have posted it, talking about planes, trains, and automobiles. So I feel like I'm somehow having a little stealth John Hughes series going on throughout 2020. I'm actually now thinking I have to see if anybody wants to talk about Breakfast Club. But my experience with this one is very different than most people. So when did you first see it? I guess just you grew up just kind of with it as part of your life, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I was 7 when it came out, so I mean, it wasn't anything. I think I didn't see it in theaters. Probably just reruns on television, like TBS on a Saturday afternoon or something like that. But like I said, it was just one of those movies that, my friends and I we're movie geeks, and we would sit and watch movies, on, if you want to call them plate back and then, but we'd hang out and just kind of and just watch TV and watch movies. And there's just certain ones that we just kind of quoted to each other, even just, passing each other in the hall at school, But yeah, it was something, like I said, I was only 7 when it came out, so obviously I didn't see it in theater. But as a teenager, I mean, what kid didn't want to skip school and go explore in the city for a day, and get away with all of it? The principal chasing after you and duping him every single time he tries to catch you, and what kid doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of what I was getting at with the suburban fantasy, is obviously there's no Jedi or elves or dwarves or any of that kind of stuff in here, but you're following this like teenage philosopher / Dennis the Menace kind of situation.
Yeah.
Where everything just falls into place. He's able to kind of, to throw in another 80s reference, kind of Axel Foley his way into any situation and out with no problem. And
he's smooth.
Yeah.
He's just smooth.
And we should obviously point out this was made for $5 million and it grossed $70 million in 1986. So this was actually one of the biggest hits that year.
Yes.
Matthew Broderick was nominated for a Golden Globe. It's kind of defined his entire career. So, I mean, and rightfully so. My experience watching this for the first time was, I think about probably 8 years ago, actually. I didn't grow up with any of really John Hughes. The only one of his films, weirdly enough, I guess pun intended, that I grew up watching was Weird Science. Like, I didn't see Breakfast Club or any of these movies until much later. And then when my wife discovered that, she was like, well, we need to watch Ferris Bueller, because her experience was sort of like yours, where like she grew up with it. She would go over to like her friend's house and they had the movie and they would watch it a lot and that kind of thing, quoting it. And it was like part of her day-to-day reference points, basically. So I finally got in on it when we got together, and she brought it to my attention, and obviously I'd heard of it. And by the time I finally got around to watching it, it was one of those things that it's so ingrained in our culture, and you don't realize that until you're coming at it from a perspective much after the fact, that so many scenes in it I had seen referenced or parodied on like Family Guy and things like that, where when I watched the movie, I was like, oh, that's what they were referencing. I didn't even get what that was until now. It's such a big movie of that decade, and also just not only of John Hughes' career, but also influential in the genre as a whole, kind of going forward.
Well, there's a lot of pop culture references in the movie itself. But going off of that, from 86 on, a lot of other medium have used it as a pop culture reference too. So, I mean, it was definitely something big for that time. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's like I said, you can also see, I think, in this movie, I think there's a little bit of the seedling of an idea that would turn into Home Alone a few years later. Do you see that as well? Because I picked up on it this time.
Yeah, just in a
I know, like older. It's just
Ferris Bueller's 10 years older, or 7 years older or whatever.
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely, and that's another John Hughes classic for sure.
Right, and then it seems to me, especially with the mechanism for when his mom goes to check on him in bed, the sort of the whole
absolutely
that whole thing felt very very much like reminded me actually of Home Alone 2: Lost in New York, when Tim Curry goes to check on in the break into the room, and he's got like the clown doll in the shower and all that. It reminded me so much of that kind of thing. But then on the flip side, Jeannie, played by Jennifer Grey, who obviously was like a year away from her really big break out in Dirty Dancing. She's also a little bit of the Kevin McAllister here too, because she's like, oh, I hate my family. She even says I want out of this family at one point. So I think you really kind of see when you look back at John Hughes movies, you see kind of these running themes and sort of these elemental, as you were saying, what kid wouldn't want to do these things and like live this life and break away from that? Like, life would be so cool if only I didn't have to go to school or listen to my parents and blah, blah, blah. And you get to see that play out in kind of a best case scenario.
Absolutely. And it's what I kind of think, I mean, even now, I mean, I love to watch the movie. If it's on TV, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to watch. And it is on Netflix right now. Those of you out there who have Netflix it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, now people have plenty of time to Netflix things too. So
absolutely. Watch Ferris Bueller. That's, even now, like I said, I stop and watch it, and but it was just it's just one of those feel good movies that has definitely been a favorite of mine over the years, and it was one of the ones I wanted to sit and chat about with you.
Yeah. Another element that I really like of this movie is all the fourth wall breaking. Like I love all that stuff, and I feel like this is probably one of the best examples of it, and one of the ways in which this movie has been so influential. I don't know how common or popular that was prior to this movie.
I don't think much. No,
Yeah.
and it was funny the basically he's giving you tips and tricks on how to get away with everything while he's doing it.
He absolutely is. It strikes me now that we're talking about it. It feels like the movie is almost based on like an advice book. You know how they have like what to expect when you're expecting, and like he's just not that into you, and those are like life self-help books, and then they somehow turn them into movies. This sort of feels like that. It's like how to skip school and get away with it, and then they made a movie based off of that book. Is what it feels like.
Absolutely, that's very funny. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
But yeah, because obviously we get that throughout. He sort of narrates things and points things out, and in a way you could almost be like, well, that's kind of a gimmick, whatever. But I mean, I don't think it really was at this point. Like we were saying, I think that was kind of original, or at least if it had been done, hadn't been popularized in the same way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it kind of added to the fun of it. He would, look at the camera, and obviously the characters around him aren't talking to the camera either. It was just him that was, breaking that fourth wall, which I think it made it a lot more fun. That, you were kind of getting his thoughts without him, there's the acting aspect of it, obviously, but, getting into his head and seeing his rationale behind things, I think was just that much more funny.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's more like a kid's view or a teenager's view on adult life, where everything is exaggerated. Like, not only Ferris, just the movie as a whole, really, because everybody, you're seeing strictly from the perspective of Ferris, of Cameron, of Sloane. And so everything is like, oh, this is what marriage must be like. My parents hate each other. And the principal is like a demonic, crazy person. Like the whole movie, it feels like what is it? I think it's Peanuts, where all the adults are talking like, and the kids are the only ones that make sense, or something like,
right.
Oh man, I had it in my head and now I lost it. Something like Muppet Babies or Rugrats. That's the one I was thinking. Where it's like the kids know what's really going on, and the adults are just like off in their own, all wrapped up in their own bullshit, basically. So I liked kind of seeing it now as an adult. I mean, I was an adult when I saw it, but seeing it now, especially as a parent, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. This is completely a kid's perspective on everything, on adulting. Like, these parents, they don't know what's going on. They just need to stop and look around. They're gonna miss it, that kind of thing. And it's on the one hand sort of naive or innocent. It's not, these kids don't know how much more complicated their lives are gonna get when they enter the real world. But it's also, there's something kind of pure and elemental about it as well that I think speaks to why the movie resonates with people that not only grew up with it and have that nostalgic connection, but also, it kind of taps into that it sounds cliche now, but like that kid in all of us that are like, I remember that time when I was hopeful and optimistic and not trudging out of bed every morning, be like, oh, let's see what's in the news these days, coronavirus, and like, oh, this crazy stuff. Yeah. Oh, come on now. And I think there's something, like I said, there's something pure about that that's really admirable and makes you want to go revisit it again and again.
Yeah, I mean, nostalgia is big. I mean, it's just something that I think everybody, whether you're a movie lover or not, you kind of go back to that, that the simpler times. Everybody kind of likes to go back and remember that yesteryear. And I think something like this kind of takes people back. Yeah. I remember my senior year in high school and, and it just takes you back to a more carefree time.
Yeah, and you see those. I've seen that. I don't know if it's BuzzFeed or whatever website kind of clickbaity articles about like Ferris Bueller. You never realized he was an asshole, and I'm like, well, now watching it now with that perspective in mind, I'm like, I can see why if you're coming to it as an adult, you know, you're. It's that meme which I'm sure you've seen where it's over like the 3 stages of life. You're like Ferris, and then you're Cameron, and then you're Rooney.
Yeah.
You know, if you're coming to it from the Rooney perspective, then you're like, oh, it's Ferris Bueller. He's a menace. You know, he's a troublemaker, a punk, that kind of thing. But if you're coming from it, you know, coming at it from the perspective of the kids, and you're like, that Ferris Bueller, he's a righteous dude. You know, that kind of thing.
A righteous dude. Yes.
He is a righteous dude. Go ahead.
He was the type of guy that you want to be friends with, and he was the type of guy who you would want to rely on to get you out of a jam. Because, you know, when the kids are walking around the hall and, you know, they're collecting money in a Pepsi can for a new kidney for him, and there's all the Save Ferris signs, which nowadays would be hashtag Save Ferris.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
That, you know, it's just funny that I think a lot of people might even be jealous of Ferris and his charisma and his ability to get away with everything.
Well, it's that question. It's like, well, is he somehow immoral or whatever because of the things he attempts or the things he gets away with, like as Jeannie is, you know, berating the whole movie basically, like, why does he get away with this stuff? But or is he just really smart and knows how to game the system? And, you know, should he be chastised or kind of praised for it? It depends on what perspective you bring to it. The fact that he's not only tricked his parents, but he's got like you said, the whole town believing that he's dying. He's calling up freshmen because he knows that's like kind of an inconspicuous way to spread rumors throughout the school. You know, he's clever. I mean, he's smart, and everything kind of. It seems like he does, at least to some degree, have kind of a grand plan of what he's trying to achieve. You know, at least he plays it off that he does at some point.
Well, at least for this one day, I believe his goal is to get Cameron out of his shell.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. Do you think that like, what do you think of the friendship between Cameron and Ferris? Do you think that Ferris is in any way kind of bullying Cameron or taking advantage of his friendship? Do you think there's any kind of toxicity to this friendship, looking at it as an adult? Or do you think it's just, because I think or do you think it is more pure than that? Because I think there's probably evidence to both sides. I do think that there is a little bit of that, but by the same token, as my wife pointed out when we were rewatching it recently for this podcast, Cameron does call him on his shit. He's like one of the only people that's like, no, that's crap. I'm not doing that. You know, where do you stand on that?
You know, they're yin and yang. They're complete opposites. Yeah. That, you know, Cameron's the clam in, you know, the dark room with a hiding under a blanket, you know, constantly sick, hypochondriac, where Ferris is the bubbly, outgoing, popular guy. So they're complete opposites. But I think their friendship works really well because, yeah, I mean, do I think there's bullying? Not necessarily. I mean, if you would think about it, if now, you know, no, I still don't think so. I mean, I think it's more peer pressure and just like the pushing of, yeah, you should do this, and you know, you'd be better off if you did, and I think you'll have a little more fun if you did, and live a little, you know. And I think he really, the moral of the story, like I said, it was breaking Cameron out of his shell, and you know, in my theory. But you know, with them being polar opposites, I think their friendship just really meshes well. But yeah, Cameron does call him out on his shit and says, you know, hey, you know, you're not going to do this. You're not going to do this. And I know a lot of people in my life that if you tell them they're not going to do something, they're going to go ahead and do it. Mm-hmm. And you know, Cameron says, you know, we're not going to go to this restaurant, and you're not going to say you're some dude and
Abe
the restaurant
Froman, the sausage king of Chicago.
Yeah, people aren't going to believe you that, you know, watch me. And he gets it done, you know?
Yeah. To Ferris's point, the character really does kind of toe that line between just when you're like, all right, Ferris is being slightly too arrogant or slightly too pushy. I think Broderick lets his spirit kind of shine through a little bit, that you do get that sense that, no, Ferris Bueller seems like he is a certain way or whatever based on how he handles things or how he gets things done or whatever, but he is genuinely good-hearted. I think it's kind of the takeaway that you get throughout the course of the movie, especially when you learn more about Cameron's, really depressing home life, where he feels like his dad doesn't trust him. I mean, and again, a lot of this is from his perspective. Who knows if it's really how bad it really is in his house, or how bad it's like how much of it is just him and his anxiety, because I'm an anxious person, an introvert, and all that stuff. So I know all about how you can do a number on yourself and make things insanely much more impactful than they really are. But like his whole thing about, oh, my dad doesn't trust me, he's never will, he loves that car, and what, like, so he's got some real demons that he needs to sort out. And he instead takes that out on the car, which doesn't work out too well. But, to Ferris's whole, as you mentioned, Ferris's whole objective is to literally just get him to face that. And so if that is his motivation, I mean, I think that's really kind of the underlying heart of the movie, kind of breaks through all the craziness. And yeah, in the second half, it gets like complete crazy town where he like invading a parade and all kinds of stuff. So I mean, what are your thoughts on Cameron's situation and his the obviously dysfunctional relationship between him and specifically his father?
Well, the interesting part is you never see and we never meet Cameron's parents.
Mm-hmm.
There's no pictures anywhere in the house. We're not in Cameron's home very long, but there's no physical reference to his parents. We have no idea what they actually look like, what they actually do, whatever. His mother's out of town, and his dad, I guess, is at work whenever, this day happens. That, is a lot of it in Cameron's head? Maybe. I mean, like you said, being an introvert and being shy and being, a little backward. Yeah, the teenage angst, and you just kind of want to hide under that blanket, and you just don't want to deal with the world. You don't want to deal with high school. You don't want to deal with any of it. And your senior year, you're trying to, you don't want to go off to the real world anytime soon. You got it real cushy, in high school. But yeah, I mean, it's Cameron's character is definitely, it's a lot of us. and I think, Ferris just kind of, he breaks that shell out, and hopefully, we obviously don't see anything past this one day. Mm-hmm. What were the ramifications of the car, and the, breaking the glass and ended up in the ravine, that's something I really would have liked to have seen how that would have played out. But obviously, like I said, we'd never see Cameron's parents. And Ferris even offers, hey, I'll take the blame for it.
Right.
I'm good, and I think that was the moment where I think Cameron kind of cracked. He's like, yeah, I got to deal with my dad.
Right. I mean, he also does the pool, dives into the pool kind of, which I don't even know what that was about, but just kind of meditating under. I think that's kind of the preamble to him just getting ready to face his fears. And the movie makes clear, I think towards the end is when you really be like, oh, they're seniors. They're like literally a couple months away from this. And then they might not, things are not going to be the same regardless. It's sort of that classic teen high school comedy trope of how fleeting all of this really is, and sort of giving it extra weight because of that, which you see in things like, like Booksmart, like Superbad, like every teen high school, American Pie. I don't know, I'm literally thinking any high school movie I can think of. They all are basically like, well, this is all going to change. We need to, enjoy each other's time. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I'm just rambling.
People fear change. No, that's right. People fear change. And, coming out of high school, it's a scary time.
Yeah.
And, if you can have a couple of fun days to kick back and relax and enjoy life with your friends, one last time before you guys all part ways, great.
Yeah.
And if it means running through Chicago, not getting caught, even better.
Singing Donkashane and Twist and Shout on the... Sure.
Exactly.
It's all good. So I want to mention one more thing about Cameron, and then I want to move on to some of the... I feel like we've just kind of stumbled into Ferris himself, Ferris and Cameron, and then Ferris and some of the other characters. That's sort of the structure, I guess, that we kind of fell into. But
that's fine.
Yeah, I think it works for this movie. Cameron is also at the center of what's probably my favorite scene in the movie, which is him on the phone with Rooney as George Peterson. Rooney, that whole thing. I love that scene so much. That's not only the way he plays it and Alan Ruck's performance, the sort of back and forth between him and Ferris, but Jeffrey Jones as Rooney just kind of fuming on the other end, and Edie McClurg is sort of like as his, his like wing woman during this whole conversation. And especially the reveal that we get, like, you don't get the reveal of what's exactly happening until probably about halfway through that scene. We don't really see Cameron's side of it. We just get Rooney's side of it. And we're like, okay, what the heck is going on? This is all Ferris is doing, right? And we don't get that confirmed for us until, that point in the scene. Where does that particular scene in the film fall for you? Is it one of your standout moments? And if so, why?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's one of the first jabs they really get at Rooney.
Mm-hmm.
Rooney's like, oh yeah, it's Ferris Bueller. Well, you just wheel, the dead grandmother up here. We want to see the corpse. That's school policy, And then once he realizes, oh shit, this isn't Ferris, and he has no inkling to think, hey, it could be one of his buddies.
Right.
He would never think that, oh, this is Cameron Fry. He's like, okay, well, Ferris Bueller's on a different line. Who's this guy? And then when Cameron starts calling him, pardon my French, but you're an asshole. Yes, I am an asshole. And it's just, it's the first moment where Rooney's completely flustered over the whole thing. He's really itching to catch Ferris and just nail him. But he really thought he got him this time, and he just didn't. He just pulled one over on him, and he just completely loses it.
It's also one of those things where it's one of the only scenes where we really see Cameron actually having, like, one of the first scenes where we see Cameron actually having fun and getting in on it and really, like, getting into his performance, improvising on the spot, and like the whole "call me sir, god damn it," like all that stuff. So much. Oh, it's so great. And Alan Ruck really praises this movie still. Like he said that this is, anything that's ever in his career that's good that's came after this is all because of this movie. And he really is one of, obviously Matthew Broderick, but he does a lot with this character. Probably one of the more complicated characters in the film too. Ferris Bueller seems like he never has any inner conflict about anything. That's kind of his whole thing. Only the meek get pinched, the bold survive. That's sort of his motto. So I really I think Cameron's probably the character that I feel is most identifiable for us. And that's, in that way, I guess he's sort of the audience surrogate. So we're kind of on this adventure with Ferris, just like Cameron is.
Yeah. And it's funny, that scene, Cameron's standing in the kitchen and he's got his hand over the receiver of the phone, and he's standing there. He's kind of dancing around and kind of, twisting his hips, and he's really having fun with that moment. And that's one of the few moments I think in the movie where he kind of just lets loose.
Yeah.
And it's great to see that so early on in the film. He does kind of clam up as they kind of go out through the day. He's nervous about having the car out, and he's just a bundle of nerves in general. But that moment there was like, okay, now we're going to have some fun today. And this is the first part of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to shift gears over to Jeffrey Jones as Rooney. What a great villain. Let's just say that. He's just so much fun. And the fact that you have basically Ferris Bueller and, Principal Rooney, sort of, they both kind of have these God complexes and these egos. And essentially it boils down to basically a battle of wits between the two of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, speak to that a little bit. What do you think makes Rooney such a, not just, a formidable villain for Ferris, at least as much as he can muster, but also just such a memorable one for audiences?
Well, as an adult, you don't want to have that bratty kid get one over on you.
Right.
And I think that's really where Rooney's coming from. He's like, this kid's been a pain in my ass for 4 years. He's soon going to be out of my hair, and I just want to nail him once. And I don't think he's ever been able to nail Ferris, and it's kind of how it seems that he's never been able to catch Ferris doing anything necessarily wrong. But Rooney also knows, hey, Ferris is graduating. I got to do this.
I'm running out of time.
And damn it, here's my opportunity. I know he's skipping. I'm going to nail this bastard. And he does everything in his power in order to do it. From trying to hunt him down at a pizzeria to breaking into the home. And it's just, he's an awesome villain, but a comical villain as well.
Well, you mentioned, first of all, you mentioned how he breaks into the home. I think that's kind of one of the parts of what I was alluding to, sort of in